Yeah, so we've got Aaron McKenna against Liam Smith, which is a kind of youth versus experience, classic crossroads fight. Cruiserweight fight, which I'm very excited about. Vidal Riley, fresh off the fallout of his fight with Isaac Chamberlain, which beat not too long ago. Really good fight there. What are the other two that have been confirmed? Chris Billam-Smith coming back from that defeat to Zurdo Ramirez takes on Brandon Glanton, a big puncher from the US, who I actually spoke to about an hour and a half ago. And he's determined to win. He thinks he's got it in the bag. And I hate to say this, but probably the one I'm least excited about out of the three, the trilogy that not many people were asking for, but maybe Eamon can put me right. And that's Anthony Yarde against Lyndon Arthur 3. You may remember that Lyndon won the first fight on points, very close. A bit of a, underwhelming performance from Yarde, and then Yarde burst out in the rematch and gave Lyndon a bit of a hammering, it's fair to say. And they've both had kind of mixed fortunes since. I know Yarde's had a lot of inactivity because of promotional issues and so on. Eamon, first of all, as a whole, what do you make of it, and which fight are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Danny. I think this card, and from what I've seen as well, has come under some unwarranted criticism. Yeah, you could always want a little bit more, and when you've undercards that have been a lot better filled with quality of fights than previous years and previous offerings from promoters, you can absolutely want more and want to see promoters better themselves. But I think for the standard of the main event and then filling that out with undercard fights, I think this is really, really good. I think this is good fare. I can't quite remember off the top of my head all the fights that were mooted for the original iteration of Eubank Jr. versus Benn, the Sons. But this stands to be, for me, a lot better in quality. Outside from all the fights, what sticks out to me is probably, I mean, they all have that element of interest here. I think Liam Smith and Aaron McKenna is a very intriguing and fun fight as well. Liam Smith, some question how much he has left in the tank, and then with McKenna's were those Hennessy prospects. He picked both the McKenna's brothers up, and Aaron was always heralded as the one who would go on to do big things, and Stevie, they thought would kind of go along well as well. But then in the program, Stevie kind of ran ahead and Aaron sort of filtered back a little bit, and Stevie's now faltered a slight bit. Aaron is still in there, and he's in tough now. It's a now or never. It's a big scalp for him. If he beats Liam Smith, then I still think that's a good version of Liam Smith that he beats. But he's in tough against Liam Smith, I feel. Chris Billam-Smith versus Brandon Glanton, you just know that's going to be a attritional, tough affair, and both fighters are going to come out bruised and battered, and it'll be a real rocky type of affair in that fight. Vidal Riley versus Chevron Clark, real intriguing type of matchup. Vidal Riley, for me, unfairly gets labeled with the YouTuber, boxer type of tag. Doesn't deserve it. Has won titles in the game, which means that there should be no doubts about his credentials. But there will certainly be no doubts about his credentials if he beats Chevron Clark with his Olympic background. Chev lost a tight decision, shouldn't have lost a tight decision in the sense of he should have been beating his opponent for the European title, but he didn't. And now has an opportunity to redeem himself on a big occasion. Yarde versus Arthur, sure, I agree with you. And there's been nothing to say that there's an outpouring of excitement for Yarde versus Lyndon Arthur. But for me personally, I really like Anthony Yarde as a fighter. I find him exciting. I find him fun. I find him engaging. And he could have been in against such as the tail of Yarde's career. I think this criticism is warranted that he does go up and down a little bit in terms of the levels of opponent and interest. So you might have seen Yarde in with another European type opponent where it's just another run out, a blast out for him. And that's not that. That's Lyndon Arthur. And so there's that thread of intrigue. We've seen this before. We know what to expect here. Yarde knows how to beat Lyndon Arthur. Yarde, from his perspective, only lost to Lyndon Arthur because there was a lot going on in the background. So if those noises aren't going on in the background like they weren't in the second fight, then I fully expect to see a repeat of the second fight. Coupled with that of the desire of Lyndon Arthur. Lyndon Arthur had gone on his social media and effectively said, look, I'm retired, but for the Anthony-Yard fight, that's what's going to get me up for something. But what are you up for here? Are you up for the payday, or are you up for kind of chalking up a win column in the trilogy? I'm not too certain that it is that. I would like to hear that from Lyndon Arthur to say that he really wants to avenge that defeat to Anthony-Yard. But other than that, I think it's a real good offering for the Eubank Jr. versus Benn undercard.
So what are the chats saying? We got Thunder Road says the undercard is underwhelming. I see what you've done there. I only rate Vidal versus Chev Clark. I mean, is that partly because you're not au fait with some of the other fighters, or you are au fait with them and you don't rate them? It'd be good to know which it is. Rod Brown says, seriously, this Parker pump of late is such a boring revisit. I hope the Wire KOs him and we can get him right. MB says, I'm fine with that undercard. There's 3 good fights there. Don't know much about Glanton. Brandon Glanton, he was kind of being built up as this undefeated knockout puncher at cruiserweight. He was, who was it? Oh, Pro Box TV. He was appearing on there. And then he came up against David Light, the New Zealander, and the winner was going to get a shot at Lawrence Okoli. David Light got a contentious split decision on that card and then went to fight Okoli, and he got completely beaten out. Not beaten out of sight. He wasn't like stopped, but he got decisioned. Meanwhile, Glanton ended up in Okoli's training camp sparring him for the Chris Billam-Smith fight, which obviously didn't end well for Okoli. Although Glanton was telling me today that Okoli was seriously weight drained during that camp. So something to keep in mind as he progresses through the heavyweight ranks. But yeah, so Brandon Glanton still got that power, good fighter, determined, sparred some of the best in the world. You know, Noel Mikhalian at cruiserweight, Okoli, went in with Baturbiev quite a number of years ago now, obviously down at light heavyweight. So serious operator. But I think it's more about what Billam-Smith's got left. I saw him at the weekend. I was in Nottingham for the Dalton Smith main evented Matchroom show, and Billam-Smith was there supporting Ellie Scotney, who had put on a masterclass in her win over Miyamoto. And yeah, Billam-Smith, speaking to him, he told me a lot about what causes cramp. You've really got to speak to him about that. He gets quite enthusiastic. But yeah, on that subject, he still seems very fresh, very just generally motivated to continue with his career and get back to that top level. Glanton's rated in the top 15s, and I think the top 5s of 3 of the 4, or 2 of the 4 major governing bodies, and top 15 of all of them. So it's a good route back for Billam-Smith, who's still got decent world rankings himself. The winner of this could easily get a world title shot on another Riyadh season show. So I think that'll be, as Eamon said, a real interesting and grueling war of attrition. And then you've got Liam Smith against Aaron McKenna. Aaron McKenna was with Golden Boy. I don't know if they've still got any interest in him, like in terms of, you know, do they co-promote him or have they got him fully or whatever. But yeah, he's always looked pretty clinical, but not really been tested as yet. Liam Smith will certainly test him as long as we get the Liam Smith of old rather than an old Liam Smith. We don't want, you know, him to struggle with injuries during camp, and this is something that happens more as a fighter gets older, and struggle to make the weight as a result as well. If he comes in kind of peak condition, I think it'll be a huge test for Aaron McKenna, and maybe even a step too far, like when we saw Anthony Fowler step up against Liam Smith a number of years ago. It's just whether that Liam Smith is still there, can still be summoned for those big nights. So that's 2, you know, decent fights, I would say. But the one that really excites me, and I've criticised the Yard Arthur one enough, and Eamon agreed, but the one that really excites me is Chev Clark against Vidal Riley. I think they're both exciting fighters. They both pack a lot of power. They're 2 of the best kind of fresh cruiserweights in this country. Obviously, we've got the likes of Chamberlain and Billam-Smith and the kind of slightly more experienced, more seasoned. And I'm aware that Chev Clark and Vidal Riley, Chev Clark particularly, isn't a spring chicken, but he is fresh in the professional game, was a real class amateur. Vidal Riley on a domestic level, no, you know, bad amateur in his own right, and much more than just a YouTuber. He's looked very good as a pro so far. I think he's English champion, British champion now. And then you've got, him against, I know Chev Clark's British champion and Vidal's English, I think. I have to double check that. But yeah, really good kind of style match, I think, as well. And just not one we were expecting, not one that would have been made without Riyadh Season or Ring Magazine shows, because one's with Boxer and one's with Matchroom. And now we get to see it still in kind of close to the peak of their careers, which I think is great. And Let's have a look. Ringwalk Boxing Podcast says Wilder needs to be this year. This is against Anthony Joshua. We've got a poll about who should be Joshua's next opponent. Please vote. He's 39 years old. No need of him fighting much later. Rod Brown says AJ on the defensive back foot isn't a good look. I think he just hasn't got an adequate defense for a great fighter. It's his weak point, in my opinion. Nat says great performance and win at the weekend for Ellie Scotty, despite her, according to Billum Smith, weak calves. Yeah, well, so ask Billum Smith about that. You know, that was an off the record comment. VKNN Few LSB says agreeing with Rod. Can't wait for Dubois to knock out Parker, and hopefully the paint dry Parker hype will die off. A lot of hate for Joseph Parker in the chat, for someone who's such a nice guy as well. I'm not sure he kind of warrants this level of enmity, but you know, we shall see what happens in February. But yeah.